exciting news in the comic book world. Marvel will be releasing Star Wars Crimson Reign this fall. I think IGN has the official drop on this. They had the exclusive report on this. And this is really fascinating because this news is on the heels of the War of the Bounty Hunters event, which showcased how Boba Fett was trying to take Han Solo and Carbonite from the end of Empire to Jabba's palace. And the reason why this is a big deal is Qi'ra shows up in this arc. But what we're learning now is Crimson Reign is going to be Qi'ra front and center. And not only is it going to be Qi'ra, but it's also going to have the Knights of Ren. And keeping in mind, this is all happening post Empire Strikes Back. Charles Soule came out with a great quote. He said, the moment that I started writing Star Wars stories, I wanted to be able to tell the stories in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Such a rich, vast place in that original Star Wars timeline that's not explored. We rarely dabble there. Now, things are changing, and Charles is adding a lot to that era. It's very fascinating. This is going to be a 5-issue series with Charles Soule writing, joined with Steve Cummings. And I just gave you that quote about Charles Soule being passionate about writing in between episodes 5 and 6. He says he has a trilogy of stories with Qi'ra planned. So you have the War of the Bounty Hunters. You now have Crimson Reign coming out this fall. I would suspect that the third of this trilogy of comics would come out in the spring, 2022. That is my assumption. Late spring, early summer. That would be my thoughts here. I think it's fascinating because it immediately, once people want to go with, okay, if Qi'ra is getting so much love in the comics, it means one of two things, right? Either this character is so valuable to the story, and clearly she is a big player in this Skywalker saga era, that this is setting up the fact that she can return to the screen. We're putting her in the comics. We're going to see how it sells, and we'll see how fans respond. But this can only help the character return to the screen. Of course, a lot of people want to see some kind of continuation to Solo, a Star Wars story. Other people are viewing this as, you know what? Any kind of sequel to Solo is unlikely, and it's probably more likely that we can continue Qi'ra's story in the comics. Okay. Both have validity, I would think. I'm someone who wants to see that Solo sequel happen. And I feel like the movie Solo would have been way better as like a 4 or 5, issue, or not issue, but episodic adventure on Disney Plus. I think that Solo could have been really successful as like the first thing to drop on Disney Plus for Star Wars. Also keeping in mind that I think that the obvious story to tell on screen with Qi'ra would be that continuation from Solo, because what is she going to do with Maul? I mean, what possibly could those those characters do together? Maul ruling Crimson Dawn, basically. And you get some tidbits through, the War of the Bounty Hunters, and some indication. There's a line in there where Qi'ra says something about, I know how to handle a Sith Lord. I think she's dueling Darth Vader. She's like, if it's a Sith Lord I need to deal with, I know how to do that. And I'm like, well, that's clearly a throwback to Maul. But what does that mean? What does that mean? And so I think that story best served live action. But I don't think there's any harm in using any character in the comics. I mean, Boba Fett, didn't he start out in like a cartoon and a comic or something, and then he blew up in Empire, 2.5 minutes of screen time, and now he's a fan favorite. I mean, for the love of God, I bought a Slave One. I got the Slave One. Isn't it nice? It's a beautiful ship. I did a Lego build recently, and let me tell you, this will last longer than my second camera battery. I'll tell you that much. But for you to fully appreciate that inside joke, you'll have to watch my 4.5-hour live build that was over Saturday night. Jesse Buck and Steve Hyman joining me for that. That was a lot of fun. 2 views of where Qi'ra's future is heading. And honestly, I think the best policy is don't worry about it. Buy the comics. They're going to be great. This is literally one of the A teams in the comics world right now. I still think Claudia Gray is A team for writing novels, Star Wars novels. But Charles Soule is rocking the comic game. I will say this. The involvement in Knights of Ren sparks me as a curveball. The last time Charles Soule used the Knights of Ren, it was in the Rise of Kylo Ren 5-issue comic book series, which there were elements that I like, but then there were also elements mainly with the Knights of Ren that I didn't care for. The rotating leader didn't really do much for me. And I think that I'm just really bitter, to be just fully transparent with you. The Knights of Ren could have done so much on screen and misused, underused, underappreciated, underutilized, whatever you want to say. And so to see them in comic book form just kind of is lackluster. But it will be interesting to see, what are the Knights of Ren doing in this time period? And, I still wish that they were the crowd that was at the beginning of the Aftermath trilogy that Chuck Wendig did, these like Sith worshippers kind of going around the galaxy and collecting the Sith artifacts. I wish that was them. It's not. I'm getting over it. I have to get over it. I do want to show, real quick, though, the covers because I thought that these were worth pulling up. These are gorgeous. And something that I'm looking forward to doing in the near future is getting back to showing like my comic book collection. I love comic books, and these covers are exceptional. You have the main cover over here on the right, and I'm actually going to just pull that full so that way it stops flashing at us because my gosh, that's obnoxious. Or it's just going to keep flashing, and that's quite all right. Welcome to Beyond the Blast Doors Live, where everything kind of goes as planned. But yeah, these three covers, I think my favorite one is the far right. It's the Vader cover. It's beautiful. It's sexy. And I will get two. You know why? Because you get one to put in that Mylar with the quarter-inch halfback. That's redundant. But the halfback cardboard. And then you get the second one to fiddle through and fiddle open. But very excited for that. And again, comes out this fall. I'm very curious to see what your reaction is. What do you think right now? Everyone in the live chat, I want to know right now, real quick, what are your thoughts on Qi'ra helming a trilogy of Star Wars comic events penned by Charles Soule? Is this something that's motivating you to get these comics? I know that, for example, Scotty's in the live chat, not a big comic book guy. It's got to be a really great story to get his attention, to lock him in. I'm very curious to see what everyone's saying. Going through here real quick, Podcast The Will says, yes, Disney Gallery for everything. I already answered that question from Scotty. Podcast Wills again says, curious to know what you think this comic series means for the prospects of Make Solo 2 Happen campaign. I pretty much already touched on that, right? So I want that to have happen. I don't think that this comic book series should at all be used as an indication of where the storytelling group, Lucasfilm, Disney, prioritizes the Qi'ra character. The biggest impediment or impediment for the character and really any kind of Solo sequel is the fact that the box office sucked. And we know why it was terrible. It was not because it was a bad movie. Is it the greatest Star Wars story of all time, or is it a top 10 film of cinematic history? No, it's not. It's a pretty good Star Wars movie. The issue is marketing. It's to a larger issue, which is when you have a company like Disney owning so many large franchises, at some point, one of them will be lesser valued than the other. And so Star Wars and Marvel were kind of taking turns, right, every other year in a way. But then MCU started putting out movies every year, right? Infinity War, and it was evident when you went to any box store, you went to Target, Walmart, wherever you go, the end caps were Marvel, MCU, Infinity War, and you didn't see Solo anywhere. It was clear that Disney with marketing was putting the emphasis on Infinity War and not Solo. And that's why Solo makes like $300 million, and it was a bust. You have the Lord and Miller drama for directing. You get Ron Howard in there, which I thought he did a great job. I'd like to see him do a sequel and be able to tell this story with Maul and Qi'ra. But I just think that Solo gets a lot of crap that it doesn't deserve. I think it's a fun movie. And I think it has a lot of great moments. And I think that it definitely feels like you're in the Star Wars world. I love That opening sequence, especially that chase, I you know, I'm a fan. And I just think that it's going to take a lot for Disney and Lucasfilm to be convinced to do something major with those characters again, because they're going to want to see a big return on that investment. We know that originally Alden Ehrenreich was contracted for 3 films. Well, that contract isn't being fulfilled right now. He's got one movie. He's got one movie that grossed $300 million in the theater. So a little bit of a letdown. Ben Bamboo couldn't care less about that character doing anything. I guess talking about Qi'ra, I think the character is fascinating. Definitely when you see that initial relationship explored in Solo. I also like the idea of Qi'ra meeting Leia. That's going to happen. That happens in the comic books. That's going to happen. I believe it's Star Wars 18. It comes out in October. So when we're talking about comics ahead, that is something to be looking out for. But I think that Qi'ra is interesting because we met Han in A New Hope as this guy who was only out for himself, and he was willing to play the game, and he took a lot of risks, and he was, a badass. And, he actually picked a better path for himself compared to the girl that he fell in love with, because she kind of rises through the ranks here of Crimson Dawn. I'm a fan. I don't think that I'm hiding that from you. I think it's pretty evident how I feel.
Thank you for watching Beyond the Blast Doors. Be sure to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget, give us a thumbs up and leave a comment. Beyond the Blast Doors, a Star Wars conversation.